That's good. Kalpana, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm here.
Please go ahead.
Welcome to you, sir.
1 minute. Is my audio and video, am I audible and am I visible?
Yes, sir. You are
Yes,
visible.
sir. You
also.
are visible.
Okay. So I'll have to, my presentation I've shared.
Yes, yes. We have got that. We are sharing with the participants also, sir. So as you
Sure.
say, we will try to move the slides.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Can we start?
May I
Yeah.
proceed, sir?
Yeah, please
Yes, please
proceed.
start.
Yeah. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you to all of you to join us through FDP program held by IMSBHU and AICT platform. Time indicating to start the next session on the topic of strategies and practices to manage innovation. And the session will be delivered by Dr. AnshumanTriphathy. Currently, sir is working as an associate professor in Xavier Institute of Management, Bhubaneswar, Odisha. I would like to present his glorious achievement through reading his profile. Sir
I think we can introduction and we can start because we have already delayed by
Okay.
15
1
minutes.
minute, sir. 1 minute, just.
But
Sir has attended number of conferences worldwide, and he has contributed number of papers and articles. So, in addition, he has also added much more achievement to his career. So, I would like to welcome Anshuman Tripathi, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Oh.
Am I supposed to also see my presentation or no? Because I don't know. My presentation is not visible on the WebEx.
No, we are sharing it. We are sharing it, sir.
Acha, okay. So I am supposed to also see that screen so that I can
Yes.
just
Yes.
code.
Yes.
Start with the first slide.
Okay. Dr. Ram, please share the screen. Dr. Ram.
Rajkiran sir, can you see the PPT, sir?
No, the PPT is not visible.
Yeah, actually, that the person who's sharing, he can see the PPT in his screen, but it's not visible for us.
That is what I think.
Yeah, Sai.
Yes, sir.
Let me try. I'm trying it. Okay. Is it visible on the screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, now it is.
I'm making it full screen.
Yes, please.
Okay. Yes, sir. Now you can proceed.
Sure. So
I will handle it.
you'll make it full screen.
Yeah, I have made it full screen.
Okay. So we can move on to the next slide.
Yes. Okay. Search for an answer continues.
Continues.
Okay.
Okay, I'll start with because there's I'd like to thank Professor Rajkiran and the other faculty at BHU for this invitation. And there's a very interesting and you can say contemporary topic. So I hope that in the next 2 hours, we'd be able to. There would be. I am expecting that it would be an interactive session. There are some slides. I'll be sharing few things, and anyone who feels that they have some questions in between, they can ask. So that way, I think it would be. I think Professor Rajkiran, if you can make the screen big, I think a lot of other things, because it's small, because I don't think people can see what is appearing. Now you have to press on the right on the footer, presentation mode.
Yes, yes, F5. This one.
Yes. So then it will become full screen. Okay. Now coming back to my background, so I teach courses on strategic management, international business, and over the last whatever 10, 12 years of my teaching, I have been seeing that even today, there's a question, the answer to which every company, every organization is trying to find out. So how do we grow and how do we perform as well? So these are the two fundamental questions which every organization and we as faculty and management researchers, we are all also trying to search for the answer, isn't it? Now, next slide, please. So there's a dilemma. So how do we grow? But at the same time, how do we perform in the current situation, in the current context? Now, if we see the history of our literature, maybe the next slide.
Paradigm shift. Paradigms.
Yeah, next slide, please.
This one.
I think you have to press enable editing and then it will all work.
Okay, okay, fine, fine. Okay. Just excuse me.
Huh.
I'm
And then
sorry.
press
I'm sorry.
presentation mode. Well, nothing is visible, I think. Maybe
Okay,
I'm
now
looking.
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Huh.
So you want the first slide, no?
No, second one. Now the paradigms of strategy.
Okay, fine, fine.
Yes, this one is over. This was so we are. So we see if we see our management literature of strategy and innovation is a part of a strategy formulation. We see it has evolved in few paradigms. So the first one, if you all can maybe later on you can read through the slide, is how do we deal with competition? This paradigm was introduced by Porter primarily, where he had asked that we should look at the industry structure and he spoke about the five forces. Then there was another paradigm which was running parallelly, but it has not become popular because it's a very complex paradigm, which is the strategic conflict approach. So it is based on the game theoretic approach. So I do something, I have to anticipate how would you react. Keeping that in mind, I will take some decisions. Now you might react in a certain way. So this being a little bit of a complex scenario when the number of players increases, this is not become a very popular paradigm. Now, then in the 90s, there was this third paradigm which focused on the resources. So the resource-based paradigm. Instead of, okay, so now people are saying that, okay, instead of looking outside, try to look inside. So you had the resource-based paradigm, and then there was the dynamic capabilities. So when we are speaking of dynamic capabilities and resources, this is where maybe if you see, innovation actually comes in all the other paradigms. And then over the last, maybe you can say 2 decades, there's a fifth paradigm where people are speaking about blue ocean, innovation, all those other things we are speaking. Okay, next slide, please. Now, see, maybe these are all things which most of you know, but I would like to reiterate because this is where our discussion will build up. The basic objective of strategy is threefold. One, how do I create value? Okay. Then how do I deal with imitation? Now, imitation means either I create something new, which is innovate or invent, or if there is another invention or innovation in the market which has been created by someone else, how do I work around it? Huh? And how do I prevent competitors as well if I am the one who has pioneered the innovation or the invention? How do I prevent others from imitating it? So the second objective, as you can see, is to focus on imitation. And then the third objective is the perimeter or the boundary within which we are supposed to operate so that we are performing, and at the same time this perimeter is the, is, you can say, is the boundary beyond which maybe if we have been successful in our current boundary, we try and think of growth. Now the growth can be you are extending the perimeter in terms of products or in terms of markets. So these are the very basics. So maybe we can then go on to the next slide. Now we can't speak of innovation and strategy before going back and thinking about the environment which we are operating. Now the environment, now this macro, micro, whatever environment we're speaking of, if we try and divide it into different quadrants, we'll see it can vary between static to dynamic and from simple to complex. Now, when we're speaking of static environment, that means the variables of the environment don't change much. And if we are operating in a dynamic environment, the variables are changing very fast. The frequency of change of the variables of the environment is very fast. When we're speaking about a simple environment, we mean that the variables that we need to monitor and keep track of are fewer in number. And if you're speaking of a complex environment, then we are saying that the variables which influence the environment are many, and there are many variables that one needs to keep track of. Now, why is this a very important context, the environment? Now, when we speak of innovation, now let's say these four quadrants, all industries would fall in either of the quadrant. It's not that they all operate in all the four quadrants. Now, is there anyone in this session, in this room, who can think of an industry which operates in the static and simple environment? Is there anyone? I see. I
Yeah,
would
like in
appreciate.
automobile industry, we are running in pressing and welding. So this is static and simple.
Absolutely. Mostly manufacturing. Let's say the people who are involved in manufacturing, but the industry. When I'm speaking of industry, maybe let's say I'll tell you, give you an example. Defense equipment manufacturers. Now, defense equipment manufacturers, why is it a simple environment? Now, what are the variables of the environment that need to keep track of? Primarily, they need to keep track of the budget, defense budget presented by the respective governments across the world, which is the free, and it is static as well because it doesn't change frequently, maybe once in a year. Now, over there is innovation required. You must be seeing that if you're operating in a very stable environment, that is why you have a mechanistic or structure. That means rule-based, protocol-based. Most of the people are expected to do routine works. Standard operating procedures can be defined. You don't need a lot of creativity over there. I'm not saying R&D is not required, but that aspect or that part is confined to very few people in an organization, and those innovations will come to the classifications of innovation subsequently. Now, if you're operating in a complex and dynamic environment, you need an organic structure because it's very dynamic and the variables are very high. Let's say any company dealing with, or any industry which is dealing with foreign exchange. So there's a lot of import export happening, and multiple countries the operations are happening. Now over there, how do you innovate? Now over there, you must be seeing that the organization structure which is tuned is primarily an organic structure, because you are empowering employees at all different levels to take decisions fast. So can we have innovation there because you're operating in different markets? Yes, anyone has any question?
Sir, I'm in an automobile section. In automotive,
Okay.
you know very well that emission norms change year to year. 0, 0,
Absolutely.
0, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yes.
5. All this come on
Yes.
dynamic, right, sir?
Absolutely. But those norms are also, if you see, are simple. Now in automotive industry, emission norms are one aspect of the variable, but there are changes happening now with the transmission type, fuel type. A lot of things are also changing over there. The markets are changing. So it is not only one variable that you need to consider. Now, this is where the complexity, as you can see, becomes more. If you're taking into consideration one variable, which is, let's say, euro, the norms, those are predefined maybe once in 2 years. There's a international body now that is applicable for everyone. So the innovation is not the responsibility of one player in the industry. Maybe, okay, you can say that the player who does it fast is, you can say, is more proactive and maybe has better, you can say, reception in the market. But that change is applicable and mandatory on all the incumbents of that industry. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah, correct. 100% agreed, sir. Even if I say for school student, for kids, children, we have designed one seat that is antibacteria protected seat. So it will very innovative design from our company, sir.
Yes, absolutely. So let's move on to the next slide because there are a lot of things I have to cover. Let's please move on to the next slide. I know within 2 hours to discuss about strategies of managing innovation, which itself is a very dynamic topic, but I'm just trying to give you some gist, and then maybe we can have some discussions on the points which maybe you have some observations. So maybe if you can take a note, either you interrupt or ask in between, or you take some notes and we can have a 15-minute Q&A towards the end. Yes, please. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Now, see, I'm trying to build up the base for our discussion because you must have seen that I started off with what strategies, the different paradigms of strategy. Then I was trying to give you background about the environment and the objectives of strategy. The first objective we had seen was creating value, because when we speak of this term value, innovation can happen in any of these terms. When we subsequently move on to a slide on the different classifications of innovation, we'll realize. So innovation. So now let me explain to you what this graph is. So how do we fix up the price of a product, or how do we fix up that what kind of product should be there? That's a very interesting observation. Maybe, I don't know if has anyone watched the movie, what is that called, Made in China, in this class or in this group? Is there anyone in this? It's a 2017-18 movie of Ram Kumar, Made in China, and Moni Roy,
Yeah, I have
Paresh
seen
Rawal,
that.
and
I have seen.
okay. So what? Who's the customer? Huh? So do you remember the definition that Paresh Rawal is trying to? So Paresh Rawal, it's a very interesting thing as well, because customer is actually not aware of the need. So he is trying to say that customer is a stupid, foolish guy, and that is also a fact today. So how can the customer decide on what would be the willingness to pay? Now, marketers or organizations are trying to work or compete with each other to innovate so that the customer's willingness to pay increases. That, if you can increase, that is what Porters has referred to as differentiation strategy. And if you increase the customer's willingness to pay, now here I'm not able to draw anything in this, so I'm just trying to imagine. It would have been better had I got a control of my slides, so then I could have written something and drawn something. But so customers' willingness to pay, just imagine that that bar increases. So how do you do it? Either you do it by product innovation, or you do it by your service innovation, or you do it by marketing. So all the 4 P's or 7 P's of marketing, you can innovate on any one of them by giving them a better product or by giving them a better service, and you increase that. And in the process, and that is what is referred to as differentiation. And in that process, you try and increase the price that you are expecting. Okay. Now, the difference between the customer's willingness to pay and the price that they pay is actually also referred to as consumer surplus or value captured by customers. Consumer surplus in economics terms. Now, the price or the MRP or the selling price, now the manufacturer or the company which is selling the product, they also incur some costs. They recruit some employees, they buy some materials, so they also pay some costs. So the difference between the price and the cost that you pay is the value captured by the company or the producer service. Now your suppliers, the suppliers can be of raw materials. Now we as employees of faculty are also suppliers to the university or the institute where we are working. So we also have an opportunity cost. And whatever we receive and the cost that would have been incurred, the difference is the value captured by the supplier. Now, where can innovation happen? As you can see, innovation can happen across the entire spectrum of the value chain. Now, it depends on the company. Where do they want to innovate? And how do they want to innovate? We'll see that some subsequently. Let's please move on to the next slide. Okay. Now, I told you there were 4 paradigms of strategy that I spoke about, and then I said that that article was is a very famous, popular article by David and Tees that was written way back in 1997, and today is 2022, so almost around 25 years have passed. Now, in between, there is this term which is blue ocean strategy or value innovation. There's a term that is now becoming a buzzword. So here, reflecting back on that value curve earlier, so now companies are trying to innovate or trying to figure out different ways in which, and this framework is called the ERRC grid, can they simultaneously pursue differentiation and low cost? Earlier, with Porter's framework, people were saying, okay, just focus on differentiation or low cost or niche. But now the paradigm is that can we do both of them together? Okay, so that is value innovation. So how do they do that? So what organizations are trying to do, they're trying to be creative, and they are trying to reverse engineer and trying to understand the customer better. So they're trying to see that, well, are there some aspects of the cost that can be completely eliminated, which will not significantly bring down the customer's willingness to pay. And we have a substantial amount of savings. Or are there some parameters on which most of the incumbents in the industry are competing that we can reduce? That will also bring down the cost, but will marginally reduce the customer's willingness to pay. Now, can we raise the bars of some parameters so that the customer's willingness to pay, but it doesn't involve significant amount of cost? Or can we create some new variables or factors which none of the other competitors have ever thought of? And that will also substantially increase the customer's willingness to pay. And in the process, we can say that we are providing more value. So this is now kind of a new word. So this, like, if anyone, I'm sure many of you would have heard of this. It is also referred to as the blue ocean strategy, and this framework is the ERRC framework. Okay. So can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay. Now I was trying to tell you that, okay, when we are using this term innovation, there's not much of, you can say, consensus as well. So it's a very generic term, but there have been researchers who have tried to classify them. So it can be a product innovation. That means you're trying to make your product different from what it is, what all the other competitors in that industry are offering. So you are adding some features, or it can be process innovation. Now, why do you do process innovation? Product innovation you do so that the customer's willingness to pay either increases. Process innovation you do so that you can achieve operational excellence. You can bring down your cost. You can do something faster, better, or cheaper than others. Okay, and maybe the same thing you can also do with product innovation. So from the customer's point of view, it is something better, cheaper, and maybe more convenient. It can also be a business model innovation. Now there have been companies, I'm sure this the pioneer of this was Southwest Airlines, so hub and spoke airline route, which in India we have Indigo, SpiceJet, and all adopting, which is the business model innovation. So you completely change the way most of the players in the industry were operating. Now, conventional airline operators were trying to have a full service, you can say, bouquet of services, starting from first class, business class, and then economy class, all packed into one product or one airline. So the customer segments were different. Now over here in business model innovation, you're trying to focus on one small niche segment of the customer. So for hub and spoke airline, it is maybe the economic class. Now there's a company in US, the name of which is NetJet. Now that business model we are yet to see in our country. Maybe few companies are trying to do that. Now NetJet has a business model innovation. It is just so you let's say for the CXOs of a company, they usually try to fly first class or business class, or maybe if it's a big company, they own their private airlines. Now in both the scenarios, if you see, it's a cost. Either the employees or the senior management team is not very excited on traveling with the commoners in the normal airline, because even though you have special service, but the time that you spend is the same as what an economy passenger does. You have to go and wait, you have to fly in the same flight, you have to fly as per the you can say flight schedule of the airline which you are taking. And if you're owning a private jet, it is very expensive. It's not that you're flying on a daily basis. So what did NetJet do? NetJet did a business model innovation. It came out with fractional, you can say, ownership of private jet. So now companies, instead of owning and operating the entire airline, so what this company did was they said, okay, we will own the private jet for you, and it will just, you will own proportionate. You don't need to own all of it. Maybe you own 20% of it, and the balance 80% will sell it to 4 other companies. Now this kind of business model innovation is also seen today in real estate. One of my friends from Ahmedabad, they have started a concept, they've started a company, they started that around 2 years back, called property share. So see, either you have to own a house, or you go and stay in a rented house. Now if you want, now owning a house as an income, as an investment, is not a wise decision. The one in which you are staying is fine. So what they came out with is fractional ownership of properties. Now instead, let's say you have 1 crore rupees, and you can buy one property in 1 crore. So what this company did, they said, okay, and that is located at only one location. So what they said, you diversify. With 5 lakh investment, you can own now 20 properties spread across the country. So these are examples of business model innovation.
अच्छा अच्छा ठीक है ठीक है और सब ठीक है
You can also have open innovation. Now, so this is focusing on the routine operation. So business process re-engineering, outsourcing, these are all examples. Now service innovation. Now earlier, and this we are seeing today, let's say earlier you had to buy an ERP. Now software as a service or the subscription model. So on a monthly subscription you can do that. So service innovation. Now if the innovation is a small one, and maybe earlier the cold drinks used to be sold in bottled bottles, now you have them sold, then it was in can, then now you have PET jars. Okay, so incremental innovations, so small innovations you're trying to bring about in your product. Okay, now radical innovation is a huge modification, a big change which has changed the way things operate. Now earlier people used to write in pencils, charcoal, then ballpoint pen, ink pens came, then ballpoint pens came. Now today I think iPads and all have come where you write and keep notes on that. You don't even need to. I don't know how many students are writing today, which was happening 20 years back. So it's even our exams over the last 2 years, because of COVID, we see our students are not very much willing to write. They're saying we'll type and send the answers. Okay, so that's a different kind of thing happening because of the COVID. Now disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovation are not very, you don't see them often, but these days we are seeing a lot of them, which completely creates a new market space by destroying the old one. So we have ample examples. So let's say personal computers taking over conventional typewriters. You had cameras being replaced with smartphone these things. So all those things have happened. Now the phone has taken over. Even television people are not now owning, and they're seeing and doing things on the mobile or on the laptop. So disruptive innovation. Now let me share with you some examples of successful disruptions, and then we'll see. So we know all this. Netflix. Now are these disruptions? Do they have a life? I don't know how many of you have kept track of or keep track of global markets. Netflix in the last 3 days has corrected 50%. Why? It was a disruption. It's a disruption of the last decade. But from $600 a share, it has come yesterday, it tanked 20-25%. 3 days back, it had tanked. So 50% of you has eroded. Anyone has been following the news, or anyone was aware of this fact? Hello? Hello, am I audible? Am I connected?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
You're
sir, you're audible. You're audible, sir.
Okay. So anyone, so this was a big disruption. The first example that I'm trying to show of successful disruption. Netflix changed the way video on rentals and Blockbuster and all those things disappeared. But in the last 4 days, this company, which is kind of a unicorn in itself, has tanked 50% in the last 1 week. Yesterday, 25%, 20 from 500 to 400, and 3 days back from 600 to 500. Why? This was a disruption. So what is happening? Yes. Is there another disruption which is going to take over? Or is there something else, or has it stagnated? Because as you can see, disruptions that are happening, or these innovations, there's something new. Okay. So they're saying that, okay, Netflix is not able to increase its subscription base. It has dropped in US. There are around 220 million households. So when I'm saying 220 million households, it's at least maybe 1/5 of the world's population are using Netflix. And at the same time, competition has also come in, because Netflix was kind of a big disruption. But then today, then Amazon came over. Then you have Disney, which earlier was not planning to get into streaming activities. And then you have many such other platforms which are coming in. So the disruption might have given you a temporary edge for a certain period of time. But now the platform based products are becoming, those are now common things. Competition has now increased as well. So the cost of servicing. So what is now Netflix going to do, or what is Netflix trying to do? I'm sure many of you, or maybe all of you, are using Netflix at home, or maybe I'm sure would have heard of Netflix. Yes, they are trying to now move into content, as you can see.
Participants, you can
Squid Game.
interact. If you have
I
any
think it would be good if you interact, because
yes.
I am in kind of, as in my class, I usually, and now this has also changed over the last few years, we usually do a lot of interaction.
This is innovative teaching.
Netflix, I would like to point. Netflix, what is doing now is coming on all these OTT platforms. Earlier days, we are using the CD drive, DVD player. Now all are gone for as a distributive. Now Netflix is taking
No,
the
streaming
new.
activity. But now what is, if you see, it is trying to develop its own content. Squid Game was one of the most viewed, you can say, product of Netflix. Amazon Prime is also now trying to come out with its own content. Mirzapur, I don't know if any one of you has seen. So now the competition is not on the platforms, which was the disruption. They're going back to the old model, because what are these platforms providing? These platforms are just providing a way in which entertainment is brought to the customer. Earlier, now entertainment is a need. So for earlier, now to be entertained, we had to either go to a theater, or we had to buy those cassettes, or we had to rent those cassettes. So what it did, it brought entertainment to our home streaming activities. So it used to provide content of other, you can say, production houses. But now you see most of the streaming platforms are now trying to come out with their own content. Now, this same thing you'd also see in retail. Earlier, what was the conventional, how did you buy your products? You went to a Kirana store and you got your products. Then you had these big store formats. What were they selling? They were earlier selling the same branded products. But then subsequently, if you have been moving on to these big store formats, these retail outlets, you must have seen that now they're coming out with their own private labels. So let's say if you've gone to more, you'll see they have their own, or let's say, so that is again, now the disruption has happened, but after that, what? How do you innovate? So you are now developing either your own content or you're trying to sell your own product with your own brand name. Okay. Similarly, ride saving services, Uber, that was a disruption to the conventional taxi. But now there was again another disruption. Now this disruption has happened in India, which was earlier, which has been there in US and Europe since long, which is rent a car. So Zoom in India. So you can just book a car and drive it, self-driven cars. But there might be a big disruption that is now on, you can say, on the peril, maybe in the next few years, when you'll have autonomous vehicles coming. So when you have autonomous vehicles, now that might completely now take Uber for a ride. Why? Because with autonomous vehicles, you don't need, let's say one car can now be used by 5 members of a house. You don't need a taxi. So the autonomous vehicle, so it will go and drop the husband in their workplace, or maybe it will go and drop the children in the school. So one vehicle can serve the needs of multiple people in the house. Okay. Okay. So, okay. Now virtual reality. So gaming and entertainment, we see that. So VR devices are coming up. Now Facebook has got into Meta, Second Life. Now I'll give you some examples of some disruptions which were maybe were not successful, maybe after this. So people are now moving on to Meta. People are now speaking about this fungibility token. People are moving on to live space. So you are having a parallel world on the virtual, on the net. So augmented realities. So there was a very interesting video, maybe we could have seen, but it's fine. Positive. So cryptocurrencies today, this is again now a big disruption that is happening. All the governments are scared. Why? Because with cryptocurrencies percolation, governments are scared that people will do their financial transactions and avoid paying taxes. So everyone is trying to now think, all the governments are now thinking what to do, because now all transactions can happen on the web without now the government's monitoring them. And at the same time, what can happen is, let's say this foreign exchange, this brokerage houses, they're also, their margins and all are reducing, because you can buy something in US and pay in a cryptocurrency, so there's no transaction cost, maybe just the cost of holding and all. Okay. So there's again a disruption that, if you see, we are in the midst of this disruption today. Similarly, collaborative commerce, what I was speaking about, retail outlets. Now Amazon, that came into, Amazon is into multiple businesses, but one of them is, so that disrupted the conventional retail and e-commerce. Now collaborative commerce is bundling of services and products by, and they are now disrupting the e-commerce companies like Amazon, Flipkart and all. So people are in groups of people are coming together and trying to sell products instead of directly selling it through the platform provider. So like cloud kitchens. So you have Zomato and Swiggy, but then the restaurants are saying, why don't we form a consortium and try and not share our margins with these platform providers and have some delivery boys who can go and deliver the product. 3D printers is disrupting the manufacturing industry. So today, I think this is where now government had put a restriction on Tesla, which had tried to launch satellite internet in our country. And now we, maybe in the next couple of years, we'll see Wi-Fi, which is 100x faster than Wi-Fi. So the disruptions are all happening. Software as a service model. Then peer-to-peer accommodation, Airbnb and all, they disrupted the normal hotel industries. Electric vehicles are there. But then there's another disruption which is on the peril, which will maybe is challenging electric vehicles. If you see Reliance is not joining the bandwagon for electric because electric is using the same fossil fuels, the conventional energy. So you're not saving on the fossil fuel depletion. You're using electricity, which is nothing but using thermal energy. So Reliance is trying to get into hydrogen-based maybe energy. That can be another disruption. Online education, obviously, we are all, I'm sure all of us have been using that over the last 2 years. Yeah. So that has again brought about a big disruption. Now, next slide, please. Can we move on to the next slide, please?
Sir.
Yes, please.
CLY.
Yes. Now, I just shared with you some successful ones, but the list of unsuccessful ones are huge. And when I was trying to search, I came across many. Now, why? They have all tried to innovate. These were all disruptions, but failed innovations or unsuccessful disruptions. And why did that happen? Because we have to also learn from the mistakes of others. And that is what is being smart. Now, LG had come out around 7, 8, or 10 years back, a product called Chloe, which is like today's smart home. So your lights, bulbs, everything is automated, and you can manage it from your mobile. And LG had conceived of this product some 8 or 10 years back, but it failed at that point of time. Why? Because in a rush to enter the market, they had not done proper testing. And it was such an embarrassing thing that during the release of the product in front of media and in a conference, it failed. Okay, so just to rush to execute or to rush to, you can say, introduce the innovation in the market, they failed. So rushing is also not the right thing. So that again, if you can see, there's a dilemma. How soon, how late? Will we be too late to join the bandwagon? But in a rush to introduce it, it completely backfired and it never got back on its feet. Now there's been this product, Me Saves Kid Watcher. Today, with all these home security cameras and all, you can see your house. But this company had come out with a product again around 8 years back, where you can monitor what is happening in your house, what are your children doing. But why did it fail? Because it was an innovation. Today that innovation is there in every house. It's happening. Even schools are now installing cameras, and parents are able to see what their kids are doing in the school. But 10 years back, they had not thought of security.
So excuse me, sir. My name is Krishna Mohan. I have a comment here, sir.
Yes, please.
Say, for example, domestic surveillance at a remote place is an innovation. Fine.
Absolutely.
But this particular product was a failure because the product was not properly tested.
Security. They had not anticipated. We'll come back to that. You'll see.
No. Just let me complete my comment, sir. Kindly, please.
Yes, sorry, I'm sorry.
When the product testing is a failure and the product could not really do well in the market, how can we call it as a failure of innovation?
No, you're talking about Chloe or Me Saves?
No, I'm talking about Chloe is based on an innovation called anything, sir. Anything. All the topics that you have mentioned here, they are focusing on.
These are all
the failure of the product. So
absolutely.
The innovation is the ability to monitor from a remote place. Fine. But this particular product failed because it was not properly tested. How can I call it as an innovation failure, sir?
No. It was an innovation because to see remotely was an innovation.
That's what I mean.
Not any other company. But they had not anticipated that people can hack into the product, into the software.
Then it's a product failure, sir, not an innovation failure.
No. It is not an innovation failure. It is not able to anticipate the consequences of the innovation.
Yes, sir. Got it, sir. Thank you.
Okay, I'll come to that. There's one slide on the consequences of innovation. So let's say I'm just trying to share with you. Now let's the same thing. Kodak Casmanor. It had come out with a high power processor where people can mine bitcoins on their home, but that also failed because the integration, what they did, they said we'll do everything on our own rather than taking the help of, let's say, microprocessors from Intel and taking products from the other companies who are experts. They thought they'll build everything on their own. So what I'm trying to share with you is that we have to also keep these things in mind. It's not that we can do everything on our own. So innovation is not that it's only my responsibility. Similarly, PlayStation Classic. I'll come to Windows 8. Now, Windows, Microsoft, we can, now Windows 8, they had at that point of time conceptualized touch screen based interface. But that, maybe as you are saying, so there's always a rush. That what I'm trying to tell you is that many a times company in a rush to introduce the product in the market, what you absolutely give the right comment, they don't take a pause and maybe delayed by looking at the either doing the proper testing or trying to anticipate the other consequences. So in a rush to introduce, it has backfired. Similarly, Microsoft Zune, when Apple had come out with iPods, they said, okay, because now Apple had taken over Microsoft, so Microsoft was trying to think, what will we do? How do we now compete with Apple? So they had come out with Zune, but Apple had built an ecosystem on its own, which Microsoft did not have. So there it again failed. So Zune in a standalone basis was not working. Similarly, Sony Betamax. Sony and JVC were competing with each other, the VCRs and VCPs that we used. So at that point of time, JVC partnered with VHS, and that became an industry norm, whereas Sony's Betamax failed. Similarly, Apple Newton, BlackBerry Storm. There are many innovations. They've spent huge amounts of money in the R&D, but they have failed. Similarly, there's this Theranos. This is a very popular company, and at one point of time, it was being thought of as an unicorn. But it was later found out that they were manipulating lab results to make it more lucrative to investors, and it tanked and its company disappeared. Similarly, a sleep monitoring technology, it was way ahead of its time. So they were not able to change the perception of the customer. So customer was not ready for a product at that point of time when this kind of a product was introduced. Similarly, Merck, again in a rush, they failed to, and they were trying to come out with products for arthritis and all. But again, in a rush to introduce the product, there were a lot of long-term side effects, which maybe came after 2, 3 or 4 years of usage of the product. Similarly, Ford Pinto and Ford Edsel, trying to minimize the cost, what they did, made the fuel tank very light, and it used to explode. Tata Nano, right in front of us, failed marketing, failed to understand which customer segment it should position its product in. It earlier was trying to target two-wheelers, but then it got confused. From two-wheelers, it went to try to attract customers from the normal conventional four-wheelers market, and that also failed. Now, Colgate. Yes, please. Is there a question? Is there a question? Okay. Now, Colgate. All of us. Now, Colgate is a proxy for toothpaste. If you go to a retail shop, you say, okay, can you get a Colgate? It's all, we all do that. So there's a brand name associated for a particular product in the minds of customers. Now, when Colgate wanted to diversify, because as I told you, it's not only performing, but also growing. It tried to get into food products. Now, people couldn't relate food products with Colgate. So they say, okay, toothpaste, how can we now swallow the toothpaste and eat it? So people couldn't associate the Colgate name, because so the strong brand name has actually resulted in its failure. And that had also happened with Ponds, which also tried to come out with a toothpaste. Okay, so people were thinking, okay, now how can we apply a face cream in our mouth? So brand name is also now, which people feel is a strength, has actually worked as a deterrence has worked against you. Similarly, when you become too huge and bureaucratic and very big, you fail to anticipate the future. IBM was a big name in the 70s and 80s, but at that point of time, Apple and others came into the personal computer market, which IBM was mostly focusing on mainframes. Similarly, Google Glass. Why did it fail? Google is a huge company. Poor marketing, hefty price, and privacy issues. Now, people say that, okay, by using the company couldn't have thought of these. But maybe the people who are responsible, because they get so bogged down with technology that they forget the softer aspects. This is what I'm trying to share with all of you, that the softer aspects which technology or R&D people are not maybe aware of, and they fail to anticipate that. Okay. Similarly, Reynolds, Philip Morris, the cigarette company, because cigarette has always been a health hazard, and people or governments don't sponsor their advertising. So they came, and people are also trying to quit smoking. So Reynolds had come out with a smokeless cigarette. So it was an innovation, kind of the vapes that we see today, and the brand was premier. But what had happened, that it left us a different kind of a charcoal taste in the mouth of the smokers, and people didn't want to smoke it, because I think so that it failed to anticipate the customer's exact needs. Similarly, there was this on-demand delivery platform, like today what we have. There's this company, I'm forgetting, which in India it has become Dunzo. So there was a company like that, Ship. The model of Dunzo is based on Ship. So a flat $5 fee to transfer anything. Now it became so popular, and there was so much of demand, that the cost of servicing was not enough, was not economical. So it was an innovation, what you see. So you call up, like what you call up a Zomato, or you use Swiggy to order food. So Dunzo, has anyone used Dunzo? Has heard of Dunzo in this room? I think it's in Bangalore, and they have grown across the country, I believe. Yes? No? Isn't it? How much are they charging? Mr. Abhishek or Abhijit? How much is Dunzo? 100 rupees. So it's for flat 100 rupees, or for any product or any location distance? Acha, okay. So maybe they've learned from Ship. So Ship, when it had launched this thing some 7 years back, it said, okay, $5 standard within the same city. So people used to call Ship and say, okay, I want to transfer my refrigerator, or I'm moving, I want to. So it became uneconomical. Okay. Similarly, there are many such other examples. Let's move on. Let's move on to the next slide. It's 130. Now there was the smart suitcase. I think, let me tell you about this, the earlier slide. Radon. Now you see this one. This is a very, again, now Radon, smart suitcases. Radon. Now what had happened? Radon had come out with a proprietary suitcase where there was a smart chip installed with the battery and all in the suitcase, where you can immediately figure out where your suitcase is, or if you have lost it. Now this was an innovation, and it was a big hit, a huge demand of their product. Some 10-20,000 products were sold in a day. But now airline company, if you remember, at some point of time, there was this airline company changed, the government regulations changed, that you can't have these, you can say, batteries and all in your main luggage, isn't it? The rechargeable batteries and all. Now that, again, now how can you anticipate changes in government regulation? So that became a fail, because it was banned. So none of the airlines, so lithium batteries have to be removed and all from the main suitcase. So that failed. So now how can one anticipate this? You spend years on an idea. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Any questions till now? Any observations? I'm sorry. I don't even know how many participants are there. Any questions?
There are 110 participants.
Okay.
Total is 150, I suppose.
That's I think 40 are absent. Okay. Next slide, please. Can we move on to the next slide?
Yes.
Now here, I'm trying to share with you some data which has just come out in this week's HBR, where this professor, Julian, he's trying to say, we are all speaking of innovation, we are all speaking of disruption. So what he did, he tried to figure out that in the Fortune 500 company from 1995 to 2020, which is a span of 25 years, how many new companies have joined that list? And he found that only 17 companies are these unicorns, like Facebook, or maybe Google, or maybe Uber, or maybe Netflix, or whatever. Only 17 have joined. So that means majority of them are still there. So even though we are speaking of innovation, it's not that we should all jump into the bandwagon of innovation. Okay, it is required. But this is what he's trying to advocate. Okay, so there's this. And similarly, similar story happens in the next slide in the global 500 companies as well. Can we move on to the next slide? Next slide. So globally also, if you see, only 12 companies have joined the biggest 500 biggest companies. Now there have been some which have gone. Now they have actually maybe shut down operations, or they have merged, or they have gone bankrupt. There are different reasons for that. But new companies, so it's not that innovators are ones who are always outside the boundary. So innovation is also happening within these big companies. Some of the innovations are failing, like we saw Google Glass, or for Google, or Microsoft Zune for Microsoft, even for Sony, PlayStation, and Nintendo have done some mistakes. Colgate companies, like Colgates have also done some mistakes. Coca-Cola, when it tried to introduce the new Coke, again, now people, when they go and ask for Coke is supposed to be one of the most popular brands of the world. So they have in the back of their mind a certain perception of the taste of the product. So when Coke had come out with a new product, new Coke, where it had tried to reduce the sugar content, it was not favorably accepted by the customers, and it failed, and it had to withdraw. So innovation, customers they don't want it, even though you feel that customers are trying to avoid sugary drinks and all, because it's not a good thing. So they had to withdraw. Okay, next. So next slide, please. Yes. So what Professor Julian is trying to say that, well, most of the time we feel that, okay, there's a lot of disruption happening and we have to jump into the bandwagon so as to survive. Otherwise, everything will change. But he's saying that with the data he's trying to present, that it's not the case. Well, there are few. It's not that it's not happening. Maybe out of 517 means hardly 3%. And out of 500 globally, 12 means hardly 2%, like some Alibaba and all. I said, okay, some companies are coming up. They're backed by big investors, but it's not that majority of, so that means 98%, 97 to 90% of the companies who are in their conventional business have not gone out of business. Okay, next slide, please. So Professor Scott, now where and how do we have an innovation strategy? So if you see across the value chain, this is what he's trying to show. So the innovations can be targeted at any of these spokes. Innovation can be aimed at the customer. Innovation can also happen in the distribution channel. So direct delivery. A company launching its own website, having its own website, and is also saying that, okay, instead of following the conventional distribution channels, I can serve. So it's a service innovation. Or assuring a steady state of revenue by a subscription based model rather than having a one time sale. A lot of companies are also doing that, or changing the type of offering. Or it can also be brand innovation. Now there have been a lot of companies, luxury brands, like let's say Louis Vuitton, or maybe Donna Karan New York, or maybe, I'm sure you would have heard of the name Toyota. So there, now Toyota has maybe, you have Corolla, Altis, Camry, Fortuner and all, and even Land Cruiser. But they have done a brand innovation. When it comes to Lexus, they are not using the Toyota name, if you'd say, because they are now trying to position the product in the luxury segment. Similarly, Donna Karan New York, it's a luxury brand. Now, what kind of brand innovation they did? Because they saw that, okay, in luxury market, the market is small, even though it is highly profitable, but there are other segments. So they came out with a sub brand called DKNY. So that can be also a brand innovation. Similarly, revenue source. So alternate revenue sources, fixed model versus a monthly subscription, a one-time use. So innovation, you can also partner with your suppliers and partners. You can have, so go-to-market approach can also be innovative. Now, these platforms over the last 4-5 years, we have seen most of these platforms coming in. You must have seen that when they launch a product, the launch of the product is usually at a cheaper price, which is you can counter logic to the wisdom that launch is usually at a higher price and then gradually increase in price because you have to recover your R&D and marketing expenditure. But here, for the platform-based companies, in the go-to-market strategy, they have innovated by introducing or selling a product for free, practically free, with a lot of gifts and all, so that the customer base increases. Okay, next, please. Next slide, please. This is very interesting one. Now, how do we act? Next slide. So we are all, earlier we used to be flooded with less amount of information, but today, because of the technological revolution over the last 15-20 years, and with the social media percolation over the last 2-3 years in particular, or 5-6 years in particular, there is information overload. So there's a lot of data. Now, when you are thinking of innovating, you are processing some information, is workable, what can work. So with so much of data, how do you take an action? So this is the information action paradox. Now, if you wrongly process some information, then you will land up in the situation with one where I'm trying to show you unsuccessful disruptions. But if you are late, then you will have another company which will come, enter, and will take up the entire market. Because now the market is not just local or regional or national. It has now become we are all operating in a global market. Okay. So this is a very important thing one has to consider. There's a lot of risks involved, because when you are, so should you focus on your current performance and innovate, or you should focus on the future? You allocate and reallocate your R&D budget between these is the challenge that companies are facing today. Okay. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Uncertainty. So what do researchers suggest? So now uncertainty is good, because uncertainty is, you'll see there are times when we know that we don't know something, but there are also many a times we don't know what we don't know. So that is also a kind of uncertainty. So the pyramid should go like, you have multiple projects focusing on few products. So you have a portfolio or program manager at a firm level, and you also sense or get information from the networks. So within the firm collaboration and with your other network, so it can be a supplier, it can be a customer, so you're sensing opportunity. Through your programs and portfolios and projects, you are increasing your responsiveness. But all of it is done keeping in mind the design space and the innovation landscape. Move on to the next slide. I'm just trying to rush through because. Next slide, please. So how should we balance our portfolio of R&D projects? Okay. Now here we can go into two aspects. Now if I take the student, I think some of the participants have to maybe mute. Okay. So how to win and where to play. So here it's something similar to the Ansos matrix, as you can see. Ansos matrix is product and market. So how to win? So now the answer will be that it depends on the industry where you are in. You have three categories of projects. One is strengthening your core. That means your current performance, focusing on your current performance. Then you have some incremental products and assets which are adjacent to your core, which will gradually change, and like Netflix, from platform it has got into content. Let's say this big retail store format, they are trying to have their own you can say private labels. So adjacent. Then maybe you think of transformational. So if you are operating, so this is what is the logic. So maybe transformational should be around 10 to 15% of your R&D project. Adjacent should be around 20%, but the bulk of your R&D should be on your core, because you would have seen that the core you have to protect anyhow. Okay. So how you manage your investment portfolio. Next slide, please. Can we move on to the next? Now, here, I was trying to discuss with you the different innovation classifications. Now, there's another school of thought. They're saying that, well, okay, there are different kinds of innovation. And it can be product, it can be service, it can be the business model. But try and look at innovation from three aspects. One, what is the change? What is the change impact? What is the strategy impact? And what would be the impact on the market? Now, if you look into these aspects, you have a dimension where you have 8, as you can see, which is the fourth quadrant, the full cube, 8 different possibilities. Okay, starting from paradigm selection to maybe design innovation to incremental innovation. So you focus, so you allocate your budget among these 8 portfolios. Okay, next slide, please. I'm trying to wind up by 2 so that we'll have some Q&A for the last 15-20 minutes. Now, Professor Christensen, Clay Christensen, he was the professor of Harvard. He was earlier with McKinsey. So he has tried to focus again the same thing, which I have been speaking till now, that performance versus time. So he's saying that disruptions, so it's your focus would be on the core, and then some part. But if you're operating in an industry where there's a lot of change happening because your competitors are all innovating and customers' demand is increasing, then maybe you can focus on the transformation one. But disruption innovation, the focus and the cost allocated should be low, because you don't know whether it will work or not, because there might be another disruption brought about by another industry player. So pay attention to improvement trajectory, the trajectory which I had shown you in the earlier slide. Focus on core, then move on to adjacent, then think of disruption. Okay, the same. The next slide is also a same thing in a different format. Next slide here. So focus on the base, then trajectory is improvement, then move on to the next, and then go for radical. Okay, and the impact on the market can also be different. So the one on the right quadrant, bottom, so focus on the core product and brand, strengthen it, because you have to protect it. Then you have some derived projects which are kind of similar to the trajectory products. Then move on to platforms, so that build an ecosystem with your suppliers, with your customers, with maybe substitutes as well, so that you reach new customers. And then maybe think of disruptions, breakthrough projects. Next slide, please. So what are the strategies? Now, this Professor Julian has also spoken about some strategies to respond to disruption. Maybe if you are late and there's someone else who has brought about a disruption or has come out with an innovative product. So he's saying either you are reacting, that means offensive, or you're trying to defend yourself. Huh? And at the same time, the other dimension is the market. So you are either focusing on your current market or you're trying to do that in the new market. This again, as I said, similar to the Ansoff model. So in your own market, if you're trying to defend, he's saying that the strategy that you should adopt is retrench. Retrench in the sense, he's saying that there's a disruption that has happened. And you, in your own market, there's a disruption, but you have not introduced it. So how do you defend yourself? So he's saying, try and look for others who have also been affected and try to collaborate with them. So best example is Konica and Minolta, even though they were competing with each other, they merged. So the benefit is now together, you are now trying to take the competition head on, because you have added on to your customer base, you have added on to your marketing budget, you have added on to your R&D budget. So together, let's defend together. Okay, but now what is the risk that you have to convince customers as well to accept or buy into that idea. Now so either one is defensive. Now what is offensive? Now how do you take them head on? Now here, when Netflix was introducing this platform business, Disney, which was around 10 years back, Disney didn't have much. It's not that it had paucity of funds or resources. Why is it that do you think it didn't jump into the disruptive technology? Because it wasn't this entertainment business, it was producing. It was a production house. So they're saying double down. Double down in the sense they increased their content. They focused on, they tried to say that, okay, let our content be so good that the streaming partner has to use our product. Let us not get into the streaming bandwagon. So they came out with 150, 200, 250 million dollar budget movies. So they said, okay, every year we should have 4 or 5 big movies, like let's say Jurassic Park or maybe whatever those Disney productions, where huge budget was invested. They said now others can't compete, so we have doubled our investments in our production. And customers obviously want to be entertained, so others now can't compete with us as well because they can't have that kind of a budget. Similarly, there were a lot of pharmaceutical companies jumping into biotechnology, but Pfizer didn't do that. It said, okay, my marketing. So they increased their expenditure on marketing. So that is offensive. How do you react? Now, if you are into a new market, now coming back to Disney. Disney felt that, okay, now the disruption that Netflix had brought about has become popular. So instead of now focusing, that's now disruption is a accepted, you can say, practice. And Netflix was now trying to come out with its own content. If you see, Disney has also got into streaming, but by acquiring different companies. In India, it acquired Hotstar. Partnered with it. Okay. Similarly, if you're getting into a new market and you want to offend because you are trying to take on the competition head on, so how do you fight back? So you move quickly. So similarly, so let's say the Southwest Airlines and EasyJet and all these low-cost models, they were giving stiff competition to British Airways flyers. So British Airways also tried to launch its own service Go, the light model. Similarly, New York Times, online media was giving a close competition to the New York Times paper circulation. So they moved on to NY Times. So we see that now happening today in most of these newspapers. They're all trying to come up with their online model and asking for maybe a monthly subscription of a smaller amount. Similarly, now, but then there are some who couldn't succeed. Now, when Google had become popular with its search algorithm, Microsoft also tried to emulate that, but it couldn't do it. Similarly, GM came out with Mavern and it couldn't upset Uber. So there have been also some unsuccessful ones where the fight back has not been successful. Now in new markets, there's another one. Now move away. Now when there was a change in this, you can say camera technology, Fujifilm, it moved into healthcare. So it diversified into a completely unrelated business and has become a big name over there. Okay, so you move away from the current product, and so it's Ansof's, as you remember, the diversification model. So 4 ways to respond to these disruptions or these innovations by others. Okay. Next slide, please. So now we are trying to, so we have answered, if you see till now, we have tried to answer what exactly was innovation, why is it required, how is it managed, how much you should allocate. Now we are trying to come looking into internal. Now, how do you develop your own capabilities? Now for that, Professor Ruth, she has tried to suggest few things. So they're saying first try to understand your growth gap. Is there a gap in your growth? Are you curtailed? Are you not able to grow? Is your sales revenue declining? Is the sales revenue some other substitute product increasing? So first try to identify that and then prioritize your portfolio of opportunities of what you should be doing with your R&D. Okay. So again, if you see the same thing is being rephrased in different words, focus on the current business, then the trajectory, and then finally the new radical one. Okay. So assigning spending to what is necessary to keep today's business going, deciding on what to invest in the next generation of your core, and figuring out how to explore options for the future that offer long odds on a huge return. Okay. Next slide, please. Now, next slide, please. Now, it's not only doing this, but how is it going to be governed? Who's going to be responsible? Who's going to take key decisions if some unintended consequences erupt? So what should be the governance mechanism? How are you going to decide within your portfolio what is to be dropped, where maybe so that is again a very important aspect that companies usually ignore, but they have to think about it from before. Okay. So the governance mechanism of the innovation practices. Next slide, please. Then, how do you allocate your resources for innovation? So they're saying that, suggesting that try and have a strategy scorecard, which is similar to that innovation strategy slide where I was trying to show you a circle. Try and categorize each of the projects into either exceptional, acceptable, undesirable, both from a company's point of view as well as from a customer's point of view, or maybe the stakeholders' point of view. Now, the people who are supposed to be responsible for managing, now not everyone can innovate. You need to have a small group, and there have been different suggestions on where this group should be. Should they be kind of a spin-off and should be sitting away from your office, from your normal employees, with a different kind of a culture? Or they should be there with your employees so that they are able to generate, because for innovation you need information. Now the information is generated by your current employees, by your sales people, by your finance people, because they are interacting with the different stakeholders on a daily basis. So there's this dilemma. How do you balance? Should they be completely different or should they be together? Now this is something which is very important, because if they are together, then maybe there will be a lot of social loafing or free riding, or maybe there would be a lot of information, and the culture of the current employees, they feel, why are these people given a privilege and given special treatment? So that's a thin balance. How will you start? Now there's a new word, I'm sure all of us have heard of, prototyping. She is suggesting prototyping, coming back to why Clio failed. Had they come out with a prototype, and maybe within the employees itself, they could have done a conference before going to the media. So have a prototype, work because if you have something, then it is very difficult to again scale back and refine it. But go slowly. So at an early stage, do not start with a huge team, big ambitions, and a major budget. So that's a recipe for total disaster, and we've seen the examples that have happened. So in a rush to get into things. So start small, prepare a prototype, take suggestions. Maybe you're losing out on time. But coming back to that example where I was showing you the Fortune 500 and other companies, it's not that unicorns are born every day. So you still have time. It doesn't matter if you're maybe a few months, maybe a year delayed. Okay. Now, next slide, please. So we see there are a lot of unintended consequences that can happen. And we had seen some examples in those disruption innovations. Now, the unintended consequences can be favorable and as well as it can be unfavorable. If it's favorable, it's good. But if it's unfavorable, what do we do? So today we see this propagation of misinformation with the social media population, information privacy breach, concentration of information and market power. So those who have access to information now, Google and Amazon, they have been accused of showing in their search results products for which either they own it or they have been paid for. So the concentration of info. So this is an unintended consequence. So increasing inequality in the workforce. So the rich are becoming richer and the poor are becoming poor. So there are a lot of so reduced access to essential goods and services, alienation or social isolation. Now, because of all this technology population, we see people are all confined in their houses, on their phones or on their computer. Over the last 2 years, most of your kids, they have not been able to go out and play with their friends. So there's a social isolation, alienation happening. So physical damage to the environment, so climate change and all. So fake news. So all these are maybe the unintended consequences. So search bias was what. So now companies are also trying to invest in artificial intelligence so that can give them, because now it's not easy for a human mind to process so much of information. So how do you manage that? So elevate the consent. So first of all, discuss, anticipate, spend some more time in planning. So anticipate what can be the unintended consequences. Then the corporate governance that I was telling you about, make them aware of the unintended consequences, speak and discuss with them on what would be their reaction. And at the same time, partner with regulators to create an accountability. Now, there was this torrent files, you can say digital piracy. So movies and all were available on social media or on this. So they lobbied with the government and it has all been banned, as you can see. So it's not, well, there are ways in which people are trying to work around, but at least there's been a ban. So in theaters and all, you can't take cameras and mobile phones and all. If you're caught, there's a huge fine. So partner with regulators to also create accountability. So anticipate that the government aware, because there's a loss of revenue. So this is how you can manage that. Next slide. Now, how do you manage change? This is a very important aspect, because now you've worked around the innovation. You are brought into the idea of the innovation. Next slide, please. Now you have to manage the big part, which is change in both the employees of your organization as well as the customer. Next slide. Next, I'm talking about the next slide. Next slide, please.
This one, sir. Reactive change.
Next slide. Next slide. Yeah,
Okay.
please, if you can. So now you have successfully, you can say, introduced or maybe are ready with the innovation. Now you have to commercialize it, or maybe you have to have the buy-in of your employees, or maybe you want to commercialize it and have the customers. So there has to be a change. No, the slide before that. Now change can be of two types. It can be reactive or okay. Now depending on where you are, now if you have been given the responsibility, so either you have very high power, let's say you're the vice chancellor of a university, and So for you, it is easy to bring about or introduce the change because you're convinced of the innovation or the idea. But if you're maybe a professor in one of the schools, you are not. So your power is limited. So power of the change agent is limited. So there, and even the change, is there an urgency of result? It can be high. Why is it high? When someone else has brought about the change. Let's say this COVID. Now all of us are on Zoom or taking classes on WebEx. So urgency of result was high. Doesn't matter even if the power of the change is low. One says, okay, go ahead and do, because we want to not let our performance decline. But if the urgency of results is low, now simulations, let's say in education, we are all, I think, faculty. So simulations. I've been teaching through simulations in 10 years, and I've been trying to convince our Jesuit fathers that, well, I've used most of the simulations of across the world. I've been trying to tell them that please invest in simulations, because this is the way the future is going to be. Over the last 1 year, I see Harvard has introduced 35 simulations to teach. The case-based method is becoming old. So the power of the urgency of result was not high. Well, let's continue with our current way. Why invest in simulations, developing simulations? Well, most of the simulations, business simulations, games, are products of either Europe or US. So it's very difficult when the power of the change agent is low and the urgency of result is low. So that's a very difficult situation to introduce change. Okay, next slide. I think this change, I don't have to speak much. Next slide. Change, I'm sure all of us know. So,
This one, sir.
so
6 types of change
yes.
level.
We'll move on to the next slide, please.
Okay.
Change, I think, change is required, but I will just focus because it's already 2:2.
Individual stages in adoption.
Yeah, so I'll maybe speak about this change model. All of us need to know, and I'm sure we'll be knowing. We have heard of Kurt Levin's model of unfreezing, then freezing and refreezing and all. So there's again another model, ITA, so awareness. So you have to first of all build up the awareness. Now it can be your employees or it can be the customers. Then generate their interest. Then motivate them to try, which is the trial stage, and then finally convince them to adopt it. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Now within an organization, you'll see there would be different hurdles. So cognitive hurdle, people are not ready for change, or there would be resource hurdle, you don't have enough maybe budget or money or employees, or people are not motivated, or there is a political angle. There are others who feel that, well, the change is going to upset their power, and they want to protect themselves. So there are all these different kind of hurdles you need to be aware of before you are starting, and then work around it. So how do you overcome them? So next. So just some suggestions are there. Now let's come to the next one. I think this is fine because it's already 2. Managing. So now let's look at it from the customer's point of view, because they might also resist. So how do you manage the resistance from customers? So we have to be aware that from a customer's point of view, there can be some dependent from the customer's point of view. There are dependent characteristic and independent characteristic. Dependent means they are using the product on a daily basis, and they feel that, well, will it give them an advantage from the current product? So relative advantage. Is it compatible with most of the other products that they're using? Let's give you an example. Let's say when Apple was thinking of iWatch. So the customer will think, well, is that watch going to be, you can say, better than the normal watch? Yes, maybe, because it has some other extra functionalities. Is it compatible? Well, the normal watch, it's not compatible, but Apple Watch is promising few things. Is it compatible maybe with Google or others? No. Perceived risk. What will happen if I wear it? Will I have a heart attack? Will those radiations affect me? All those things. So from a customer point of view, you have to think that what can be the dependent characteristics, and you have to anticipate in your communication, in your marketing, in your promotion, so that these issues are addressed. Now there are some consumer independent characteristics as well. That means they're not directly affecting the consumer. So they are okay with trial, but once they try, is it that they have to buy the full product to try it and it can't be reversed? because and it requires a huge amount of investment. Is it can it be customized? Can it be modified? Well, some of the products or the innovations says this can't be done on a customer level because then the cost will increase. Or is it too complex? Let's say Microsoft Excel, most of us use, but there are so many functionalities. I'm sure many of us and even many of the users of Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Windows, they don't use it. So those innovations which the company has maybe thought of, maybe the customer is not aware, or it requires a different intellect level. So it's a very complex product. So try to manage it. So rather than spending so much of money on increasing the complexity, try to make it a simpler product and then gradually go for incremental innovation.
As I am an Ilonggo and my native language.
Okay, I think I'll end it here. Maybe I can have some questions and all for the next 10-15 minutes.
I think we should shift to the summary slide, isn't it?
Slide. Summary. Yeah. So what I was saying, so when you are speaking of innovation, so we have to look into the conventional logic and we have to look from an innovator's logic. So industry assumption. So there are a few things which everyone in the industry has assumed. Like as I said, in education, not anyone had thought of taking classes on Zoom, or maybe even today I'm telling you about simulations. So you have to know, if you are an innovator, that industry conditions can be shaped because customer doesn't know anything. If you can package it and communicate it well to the customer and they are convinced, it is easy. Similarly, what should be the focus of the strategy? Now, usually the strategy focus has always been to compete. Whereas here, you are thinking that, well, can I dominate the market by changing the buyer's perception and attitude? And there's a quantum leap in the buyer's value. Rather than just trying to come out with Me Too products and trying to match the competitor's product. Similarly, from a customer's point of view, like most of the successful innovations and even the unsuccessful innovations I was trying to share, can we target some non-consumer groups or like Tata Nano? Initially, it was thinking the initial commercials of Tata Nano, if you see, they were trying to show their neighbor of a similar socio-economic strata had come in a car. So go to the mass of buyers and willing to let some existing customers go. So think of non-consumer group. Next, please. Similarly, your assets and capabilities. Think that don't get bogged down with what you have. So that's the conventional logic that, well, I'm constrained with the employees, I'm constrained with budget. Now, if you have to get into an innovator's shoes, you have to free yourself and you have to think something radically different. And that is where creativity comes. Similarly, in terms of products and services, think if you're speaking from an innovator's point of view, think of the buyer solutions or problems future. And keeping that in mind, buyers or maybe the stakeholders, because the innovation can happen on any front on the value chain. So the value innovation graph that I was trying to share with you. Okay. So I hope I have been able to do justice, because you all are faculty, you're not students, and I'm sure you will be taking all the knowledge that you are learning from most of the sessions back to your students. So
I think
we can have some questions. Absolutely.
Questions from the participants.
There is no question that is for only for my knowledge I'm asking, sir.
Sure,
my
please.
you permit, sir.
Yes, please. What will I permit? We are all colleagues.
Everyone knows Tata Group. It is not a corporate. It is always Indian multinational conglomerate group. So for making
it's a business group.
Tata,
it's a business group. So they have all these 150 group companies, the SBUs, as we call Tata Motors or maybe Titan. So they are doing innovation in their own respective SBUs. Now Tata Sons, which is the primary owner of the business group, they have a corporate strategy. So I don't know what your question was. Maybe I interrupted in between.
This means this Tata is using their total ecosystem. Okay, Tata vehicles, Tata
we
Finance.
are thinking, no, but I think we are thinking that they are all mutually but I think the business units are not operating. Forget Tata. You may I know who I am speaking with?
Sir, myself Shivram Nayak. My question is for making
Where
innovation.
no, I'll give an example. I'll answer your question with an example. I just wanted to know, where do you work? What do you do? Tata
Can you
Group, forget. My question is, where are you from? What do you do?
Sir, I am from Ashok Leyland Limited. I am working in automotive section only.
Acha, okay. I'll give you an example. Let's say Professor Rajkiran is from Banaras
Different,
Hindu University, where you have... No, I'll tell you. I'm just coming to that. You have 40 different schools.
Yeah.
How much are each of the school interacting with each other? I'm sure everyone has the answer, none. Even within a school, there are finance, marketing and all. How much are they interacting with each other? If all of them are located in one geography, within a 5-kilometer radius, and there's not much interaction, how can we expect that interaction to happen from a business group? So on paper, all of these look very easy, but in practice, these are all very difficult things. So that is why maybe the conglomerates and the big business groups have not been able to become maybe even larger or even maybe more efficient. So what was your question maybe now? So let's say Ashok Leyland Group. Ashok Leyland is in
My
trucks.
question is, for making an innovation for a big corporate or big conglomerate, it is very easy task for them because they are using
It is
total.
easy on paper. I'm telling you what I was trying to say. It is easy on paper, but in practice, politics is there. Different SBUs have their own agenda because the focus is on performance for the current, you can say, paradigm. Innovation can only happen when you collaborate, and that collaboration is very difficult, and the responsibility is of the leader. Maybe, as I was saying, that governance mechanism, if the leader, let's say, forms a separate SBU or maybe a special project unit and draws upon resources from each of these groups and puts them together and tells them to think about innovation. This is what a lot of companies like 3M and all do in practice. So you have to free the person from the focus of the current performance, because they are lost in their current roles. Have I answered your question?
Yeah, sir. It is okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you for asking as well. Anyone else?
Any other questions?
Please.
Participants, if you have any other questions, can you see some questions on the chat box also?
Okay, wait. I'm using WebEx for the first time, so I have to see
No,
where
I'm
and
asking
how.
my people to do that.
Achha, I have to read the chat, na? So I'm trying.
No, I'm asking my technical people.
So I hope whatever I spoke or shared with all of you was of interest and maybe was something different and new from what maybe you have all heard. I don't know, maybe there's paucity of time and all, and even on a virtual medium. So, but I hope each one of you liked it, and I'm sure maybe you'll take it back to your place of work and share this. There's a lot, as I said, it's all very easy to say because change is one critical aspect. Now, changing a human's thought, and that change process has to be driven by the senior management team. Until and unless they are convinced, not much can happen, I can tell you. And so that is how I would like to conclude, because we might be convinced that okay, this is required, but we might be scared to share that idea because the senior manager or maybe the founder or whosoever is responsible, they're not open to criticism, they're not open to ideas. They'll rebuke you. So you feel, okay, how does it matter? I'm getting my salary, I'm doing whatever I am to do. If it doesn't work here, I'll change and I'll go somewhere else, isn't it? So that is why maybe you don't see much innovation happening. No, it's not that there's a paucity, a dearth of ideas. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. We are so much obliged to you for such valuable
Thank you.
points. You have connected all the conceptual word to the real word, and it's very informative session. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. So I can
Okay,
end.
sir. Thank you.
No,
Thank you.
thank you so much, sir.
Okay,
Thank you
okay.
so much, sir.
Thank you.
In spite of all the glitches and problems, you stood with us, and we are very much
Thank
grateful to you. And it's
I'm
honor.
sorry I have not been responsive on mails and all.
No,
So
no,
I'm very sorry for.
I can understand your schedule. I can understand your schedule.
Yeah.
But you took time for us. That is very much
No,
appreciable.
that is fine.
And we are grateful from
Right.
the core of our heart that you have
Hello.
been part of this. And we'll try
Yes.
to connect you again in some other session.